This narrative concerning discovering a preserved Earth and waking its dormant human war machines, the Vatch Dominion confronts the revival of humanity's ancient defenses. Setting the scenario for a last confrontation, the last living human discloses the existence of an even more enormous menace that mankind has hidden away as he breaks out from hibernation. Just 4% of my channel has subscribed. Before we begin, a little reminder to hit the subscribe button. We now begin our complete story. The remains of Earth have slept in the chilly void, silent and forgotten, 500,000 years. Once the Grandia, cradle of civilization, a species that had perished inexplicably, stayed unaltered, buried under time and dust. Under domed shields, cities stood eerily preserved. Old satellites floated in the heavens like ghostly sentinels. Deep under the surface, the last traces of a war fleet rested inert, waiting. They had been waiting for some length of time. Commander Ureth of the Vatch Dominion stood at the bridge of his exploration vessel, gazing at the blue planet through the window. An unspoiled world in this part of space was rare. The Dominion had invaded and eaten hundreds of civilizations, but never before had they come across a world so abandoned, and yet it was not empty. Scanners indicated enormous artificial structures over the surface. Commander, a junior officer reported, her tendrils twitching nervously. The technology is ancient but intact. Ureth narrowed his black gaze. That was unusual. Most deceased civilizations left behind ruins eroding and degraded by time, but this seemed as though its occupants had simply walked away. He turned to the ship's oldest scientist, Kavor. Could they still be here? Perhaps underground? Kavor, his elderly features carved with caution, analyzed the readings. No signs of biological life, but there is something else. He paused, his fingers stiffening on his datapad. The planet is shielded. Ureth's brow wrinkled. Shielded? By whom? We don't know, Kavor said, but the energy fingerprints are active. It's as if someone sealed this planet away. Ureth exhaled slowly. The concept of a forgotten world preserved by unseen entities was unnerving. He had heard legends of old empires that had vanished without explanation, leaving behind only mythology and ruins. Could mankind have been one of them? Prepare. A landing party, Ureth ordered. We're going down. The shuttle plummeted into the atmosphere, sneaking past the ancient satellite network, which was still operating but unresponsive. The landing group comprised of Ureth, Kavor, and 5 strongly armed men. The moment they touched down on the crumbling pavement of a huge, motionless city, a profound calm crept over them. Towering towers loomed like motionless giants, their surfaces coated in dust yet unmarred by age. Strange symbols, human language, covered neon-lit signs that had long since gone dark. Hover vehicles sat frozen in place, as though their occupants had abandoned them mid-journey. "This isn't right," one of the troops remarked. "It's like they just disappeared." Kavor approached a nearby console, brushing off generations of dust. His claws tapped across the surface, and to his shock, it sparked to life. "This technology is still functioning," he claimed. Ureth exclaimed with disbelief. "Still functioning." Kavor nodded. "Not just functioning, preserved." He peered around, his expression concerned. This was not the work of deterioration. Someone or something planned for this world to stay unspoiled. The Dominion had overrun many civilizations, but none had prepared for their own demise like this. The humans had planned for something, but for what? "Commander," another soldier yelled out, "You need to see this!" Ureth followed him through the bone remnants of the city, past gigantic sculptures of human warriors frozen in time. They entered a great chamber, its vast ceiling decorated with murals depicting wars amid the stars. But at the heart of the room, beneath a shattered glass dome, sat the true discovery, a warship. It was immense, considerably greater than anything the Dominion had ever produced. Its sleek black hull was lined with runes of an unknown origin. It rested within a dry dock, surrounded by inactive machinery. "This is a war fleet," Kavor murmured. Ureth felt his heart quicken. "No," he corrected, his voice low, almost respectful. "This is a war graveyard." His words drifted off as something changed. The air crackled, and a deep hum echoed across the metropolis, vibrating beneath their boots. The ship's dark hull flickered once, twice, and suddenly it came alive. The ship was waking up, Alarms blared from Cav's scanner. "Commander, something's happening!" The ship's surface altered, revealing a concealed insignia, one that had not been seen in 500,000 years. A sign of a species that had once dominated the stars: humanity. Then a voice resonated through the chamber. Deep, mechanical, cold. Identity confirmed. Foreign presence identified. Initializing protocol. Last stand. Ureth had little time to respond before the entire city surged back to life. The hum rose into a deafening roar as the city around them shivered with fresh energy. Lights flickered on, antique street lighting illuminating dust-covered roads. Massive holographic. Billboards flashed back into existence, depicting human faces, military insignias, and unintelligible warnings in an archaic Earth language. But the warship was the true menace. The symbol shone brilliantly on its hull, and hidden equipment within the vast structure groaned as if stretching after a long nap. The dry dock's mechanical arms, dormant for 500,000 years, lurched into activity, spitting dust and debris as they recalibrated. The ground trembled beneath Ureth's feet. Kavor, still stooped over his scanner, paled. "Commander, the ship is powering up." "No." Ureth's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's waking up." One of the troops cursed, holding his plasma gun tighter. "Do we shoot?" "Absolutely not," Ureth snapped. "We don't even know what it's doing." Then the voice returned, cold, mechanical, emotionless. "Last stand procedure triggered, initializing defense measures. All foreign entities prepare for annihilation." A metallic moan reverberated as the warship's front bay doors slowly slid open, revealing an abyss of blackness within. The air rippled with static. The ship was scanning them. Ureth clenched his jaw. This was not an empty ruin. It was a citadel left behind for a battle that never came, a fight destined to be waged by ghosts. "Commander," Kavor whispered, eyes wide, "we need to escape. Now." "Agreed," Ureth responded, activating his communicator. "Recall the shuttle. Full extraction." "Sir, we're getting heavy interference," the pilot crackled back. "Something's jamming our signal. We can't latch onto your position." That was horrible. Very terrible. The ship's buzz transformed into an ear-piercing shriek as electricity raced down its hull, neon blue circuitry blazing to life. A heavy, rhythmic thudding began somewhere below them. Machinery older than the Dominion itself was operating. A second voice, different from the first, crackled to life. "Stand by for battle preparedness. Running diagnostics." Ureth turned to Kavor. "Can you stop it?" Kavor's hands twitched over his scanner. Commander, I don't even know how it works. It's not responding to Dominion systems. This is something else entirely." A soldier took a step back, worry creeping into his voice. "What if it sees us as a threat?" "It already does," Ureth mumbled. The warship's abyssal bay stirred, and for the first time in 500,000 years, anything moved inside. Then they saw them. Not humans, not skeletons, not the long-forgotten relics of a dead race. Machines. Rows upon rows of humanoid battle drones waited in eerie silence, their plated bodies old, covered in a weird alloy unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. They lined the cabin of the warship like statues of a bygone army, their weapons sparkling under flickering blue light. A chilling awareness settled over Ureth. The Warfleet wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for orders. And they had just awakened it up. "Finalizing combat protocols," the first voice announced. One of the drones moved, its head tilted, its glassy dark visor latching onto them with uncanny focus. Its arms unfolded, and from its wrist, a long, sharp blade of light stretched with a hiss. Then another moved, and another. The city groaned as other battleships hidden across the metropolis began to buzz with electricity. Kavor's voice was barely a whisper. "Dear gods, it's a reactivation sequence." Ureth didn't wait. "We are leaving, now." The crew ran for the exit, their boots smashing against the ground as the first drone stepped forward. Their movements were strangely fluid for machines. Red lights flickered across their forms, scanning, evaluating, preparing. Then they charged. A flare of light erupted from one of the drones as it raised its weapon. A blistering plasma bolt screamed through the air, striking a soldier square in the back. He let out a strangled cry before collapsing, smoke billowing. From the hole burned straight through his armor. The others barely had time to react. Yurith grabbed Kavor and shoved him forward. Move, move, move. More drones ignited, more red eyes flared to life. The city itself appeared to rise against them. The streets burst into anarchy. The once silent remains of Earth's last bastion now thundered with the roar of awakened war engines. Red lights came to life in the skyscrapers above, and the warships buried in dry docks gave out strange mechanical groans as they powered up for the first time in 500,000 years. Yureth's boots thumped against the cracked pavement as he rushed beside Kavor and the surviving soldiers. Plasma bolts rushed past them, tearing molten holes into the old structures around them. "Get to cover," Yurith barked. They crouched behind a fallen column as another flash of searing light tore through the air. One of the soldiers, a young fighter named Ves, barely managed to duck aside before a drone's blade cut into the earth where he'd stood. The moment it missed, the machine adjusted, its crimson eyes locking onto him with deadly precision. Ves didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. A blue plasma shot struck the drone's chest. The bolt impacted, but it did nothing. The drone didn't flinch. It didn't stagger. The plasma hardly left a sear mark on its armor. Then, with a speed no biological entity could match, it moved. Ves's scream was cut short as the drone's energy blade slashed clean through him. His body collapsed in two, burning. Kavor's hands shook as he ducked lower. "Commander," he rasped, "our weapons are useless." Yurith gritted his teeth. He had seen advanced warfare drones before, but these were something else. No weak points, no hesitation, no wasted movement. They weren't just intended to kill. They were built to win. Mankind had made these. And for the first time in his life, Yurith understood why the Dominion's oldest records spoke of the mankind in whispers. The humans had not gone to war carelessly. They had gone to war knowing that if they lost, their enemies would never forget the cost of winning. "Fall back!" he screamed. His warriors sprinted, weaving past crumbling buildings as the machines gave chase. The drones didn't speak. They didn't give warnings. They simply hunted. More warships were rising in the distance, their black hulls glistening under the city's newly reawakened lights. Ancient defense turrets along the skyline flickered, as if bewildered by the passage of time, and then began locking upon everything not human. Kavor skidded to a stop in front of a large security checkpoint. A huge blast door loomed ahead, one constructed to endure planetary attack. He fumbled with his scanner, sweat running down his temple. "It's locked," he gasped. Yurith whirled, raising his weapon. The drones were closing in. Ves was dead. Another soldier had already fallen. The last three warriors had their weapons lifted, but what was the point? Plasma didn't even scratch these objects. The drones didn't care. They were patient, unstoppable. "We can't fight them," Kavor shouted, pounding his fist into the scanner. "We need a way out." "Then work fast, Master," Yurith snapped. A soldier let out a piercing yell as a drone sprang from the darkness, catching him by the throat with one crushing action. The machine took his head from his shoulders and hurled the writhing corpse away. A second drone fired. Another. Soldier collapsed. Only Yurith and Kavor remained. Then, a miracle. Kavor's scanner sent out a loud chime, and the ancient door hissed as long-dead hydraulics rumbled back to life. The two of them dived through the gap just as the drones pushed forward. The huge door slammed shut, cutting off the nightmare behind them. The hammering of metal fists rang on the blast shield, but the door was meant for combat. Even the drones couldn't break through. Yurith slumped against the chilly wall, panting. That was too close. Kavor didn't answer. He was still, staring at the scanner, fear on his face. "What?" Yurith demanded. Kavor swallowed heavily. His speech was hardly heard. "Commander, we're not in the clear." The room they had entered wasn't merely a security checkpoint. It was a control center. Dozens of dormant monitors dotted the walls, shrouded in static. Hollow tables flickered. Data panels displayed error messages, but the main console, at the very center, was active, and it was displaying a countdown. Yurith's breath seized in his throat. "What is that?" Kavor's fingers rushed across the antique keys, attempting to decipher. He wasn't fluent in the old human language, but certain words still maintained sense even after 500,000 years. One word stood out. Retribution. Kavor looked up, eyes wide with horror. "This isn't just a city. It's a failsafe." His voice shook. "When we woke the war fleet, we didn't just activate the machines. The countdown continued. 2 minutes, 53 seconds. 2 minutes, 52 seconds. We started a planetary defense system, Kavor murmured. Ureth's mind raced. What kind of system? Kavor's hands curled into fists. He had read Dominion reports on long-extinct civilizations before. He had studied the development and collapse of cosmic civilizations. He had seen the warnings buried in the oldest historical records, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. He turned to Woreth, his voice hoarse. If this reaches 0, he took a deep breath. Everything in orbit is going to die. Ureth felt his stomach drop. A planetary defense system, not just some automated turrets, nor simply war drones. If humanity had constructed a failsafe strong enough to still be operative after 500,000 years, then it meant only one thing. This world was never meant to be conquered. And now the Dominion fleet, his fleet, was floating hopelessly in space, fully oblivious of what was about to happen. 0.245. The timer kept ticking down, each second pushing them closer to calamity. Ureth snapped out of his disbelief. Can you stop it? Kavor's fingers trembled as he navigated through the antiquated interface. The human systems were unusual, unlike anything the Dominion had ever designed. Layered encryption, military grade. Firewalls, even after 500,000 years, it was as if the system still expected an attack. Kavor swallowed hard. I don't know. It's locked behind something called command authorization. Ureth scowled. Meaning? Meaning only a human could override it. Silence. That single sentence impacted harder than any weapon. Only a human, but there were no humans left. Humanity was gone, lost. Their towns had been preserved, their warships hidden away, but they themselves were lost. The most dominant race the galaxy has ever known had simply disappeared, yet their guns remained, and they were still doing their job. Jur 210. Kavor let out a frustrated snarl. We're running out of time. Ureth forced himself to think. If there were no humans remaining, then why was the system still running? Someone or something had created this failsafe to run without them, which meant there had to be another way in. He studied the control room. The huge screens exhibited half-functional readouts of the metropolis. A couple flickered with old battle plans, long-forgotten simulations of military campaigns that had never been fought. Then his eyes landed on the pod. It was snuggled in the far corner of the room, huge, sealed shut. Its surface was covered in dust, but unlike everything else in the control center, it was powered. A preservation pod. Ureth moved toward it, brushing off the grime. His breath hitched when he noticed the label, Genetic Archive, Emergency Command. He looked to Kavor. Get this open, now. Kavor blinked. Commander, we don't know what's inside. Set 145. We don't have a choice, Ureth screamed. If there's anything left of humanity, anything that can override this system, it's in here. Kavor hesitated for about a second before he started working. His scanner hummed as he hacked into the controls, overriding the antiquated locks. The pod gave forth a slow, pressured hiss when it eventually opened. The moment the lid peeled aside, frigid air rushed into the room, and inside, something moved. Ureth's breath caught. It wasn't a corpse. It wasn't dust and bones. It was a human, a man frozen in time, trapped in the cryogenic pod for 500,000 years. His body jerked as the preservation systems shut down, his lungs screaming for their first breath in aeons. His eyes sprung open, golden, dazzling, not feeble, not delicate, not weakened by time. The human sat up, bewildered, surveying the room with intense predatory intensity. He was built for war. His physique was still powerful, despite the decades he had spent in stasis. His gaze fixed onto Ureth and Kavor, analyzing them swiftly. A voice crackled from the control panel. Emergency command identity confirmed. Override authorization accepted. Kavor gasped. The countdown stopped. Silence engulfed the room. Ureth barely had time to absorb what had transpired when the human slowly rose from the capsule. His feet hit the ground for the first time in 500,000 years. Then he spoke, his voice deep, harsh, burdened with an ancient weight. Who the hell woke me up? Ureth looked at the human, his mind refusing to process what he was witnessing. A survivor. A living, breathing human after 500,000 years. After humanity had vanished, this one remained, and now he was awake. The human flexed his fingers, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of eternity. His golden eyes glittered with something unnerving, not the uncertainty of someone dislocated in time, but the crisp, instantaneous evaluation of a soldier who had been schooled to wake up ready for war. Cavor swallowed heavily. He took a hesitant step back, eyes flitting between Ureth and the towering figure before them. The human's gaze focused on the control panels, the frozen countdown, and the Dominion uniforms. His expression clouded. "I'll ask one more time," he continued, his voice like distant thunder. "Who the hell woke me up?" Ureth, for the first time in his life, felt little. The Dominion had conquered worlds. They had crushed civilizations. But nothing in the Dominion archives had prepared him for this. A human who had survived the unimaginable, a human bred to endure. "We," Ureth cleared his throat, forcing himself to speak. "We are explorers. We came across this planet." The human's voice cut into him like a dagger. He took a stride forward, bold, unshaken. "You woke up the defense grid," he said, checking the data panels. His golden eyes flicked over the damage reports, the still-locked war procedures, the antique systems waiting for directives. "That means you triggered the failsafe." His attention snapped back to them. "So tell me, how many of your ships are in orbit?" Ureth hesitated. "A fleet." The guy breathed sharply, rubbing his temples. "Perfect. Just what I needed to deal with first thing after a 500,000-year nap." Cavor took a cautious step forward. You're human, aren't you?" The man turned to him, countenance unreadable. "Obviously, but how?" Cavor's voice shook. "Humanity vanished. There's no record of your people after the collapse. You were gone." The human's jaw tightened. "The collapse!" For a long period, he didn't speak. Then, with a slow, deliberate gesture, he reached out and triggered one of the control panels. The room faded. Holograms sparked to life, and Ureth saw what happened to humanity. The projection portrayed war, not between species, not between warring civilizations, a fight between mankind itself. Explosions rippled over the skies. Gigantic warships, larger than anything the Dominion had ever produced, smashed under. Their own weaponry. Planets burnt. Entire civilizations crashed into dust as something horrible tore through the fabric of space. Ureth's stomach twisted. "What is this?" The human's expression was dismal. "The reason you never found our bodies." The war on the television wasn't a typical war. This was something else, something worse. Cavor gestured to the battlefield, his voice barely a whisper. That doesn't make sense. You fought yourselves." The individual didn't look away. "We fought something inside us," he remarked, "something we created, and something we couldn't stop." The holograms shifted. Superweapons. Not just planetary annihilation, not just world enders. These were awful. Weapons that tore apart time itself. Weapons that swallowed the fundamental principles of physics. Weapons that unmade existence. Humanity, at the zenith of its might, had reached too far, and something had pulled back. Cavor took a hesitant stride forward. "You lost." The human let out a brief, humorless laugh. "No," he responded. "We won." He turned, his golden eyes blazing with something darker. But the cost was everything. The holograms faded. Silence loomed between them, heavy and stifling. Ureth could scarcely breathe. Humanity had been more strong than any of them had ever anticipated. They had reached into the unknown, mastered the stars, and then they had ruined themselves to stop something worse. And yet this one remained. The ultimate legacy of a conflict fought long before the Dominion even formed. Ureth took a slow breath. "You're the last human, aren't you?" The man's expression hardened. "No." Cavor blinked. "But then, there's more of us?" Ureth's mind whirled. "Where?" The human's golden eyes gleamed in the dark light. "Sleeping." He moved back to the control panel, his fingertips hovering over the antique keys, yet familiar despite the millennia. Then he said the words that would affect the course of the galaxy. "It's time to wake them up." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "It's time to wake them up." Ureth's heart pounded. He had seen many conflicts, had ordered. the destruction of entire civilizations, but nothing had ever made his blood run cold like this. Humanity was not extinct. They were sleeping, and this man, this survivor, this warrior, was about to bring them back. Ureth glanced at Kavor. The scientist's face had gone pale, his tendrils jerking in raw panic. He understood. They both did. If even one human battleship could remain operational for 500,000 years, if their defense systems were still intact, then what would happen if they all returned? Ureth took a modest step forward. "You can't be serious?" The human turned slightly, golden eyes locking onto his. "Why not?" His voice was calm. Too calm. Ureth clenched his jaw. "The Dominion rules this part of the galaxy now. If your people come back, they won't care about your dominion." Ureth stiffened. "And why is that?" The human tapped something. On the control panel, a fresh hologram flashed to life. A cosmic map, but not one Ureth recognized. The star maps were archaic, portraying an empire so enormous it made the Dominion look like a bug. Hundreds, thousands of marked worlds. Human-controlled, human-dominated, human-ruled. Ureth's mouth went dry. At their height, humanity had owned more than the Dominion. Did now. The human's voice was quiet. "You think your people rule the galaxy?" A flicker of movement. More holograms, portraying long-dead wars, armies crumbling before human fleets, entire species erased from history. "Your kind are just scavengers, picking through the ruins of something far older." The person turned back to the controls. "You don't rule the galaxy." His fingers flew over the keyboard. "We do." Kavor choked. "Wait." A deep, mechanical rumble vibrated through the floor. The ancient system, asleep for 500,000 years, sprang to life with a sound like a god breathing its first breath. Ureth stumbled back. "What did you do?" The human didn't answer. The screens flickered, depicting huge underground chambers across the planet. Thousands, millions of enclosed pods lined the passageways. Some biological, others mechanical. Others held warriors, others held commanders. Some held entities that had no name in the Dominion's language. And all of them were waking up. One of the screens portrayed the war fleet, not just the one ship in the dry dock, nor just a few hundred. Thousands, buried beneath the globe. An entire fleet had been asleep for millennia, and now they were activating. Alarms blared. Ancient launch bays hissed open, releasing dust as weapons that had once conquered the cosmos rearmed themselves. The countdown had never been a failsafe. It had been a wake-up call. Kavor grabbed the console in dread. "You're bringing them all back." The human exhaled gently. "That was the plan." Ureth's voice turned harsh. "And what happens when they see us?" The human finally turned, staring Ureth in the eyes. His expression was unreadable. "That depends," he whispered softly, "on whether or not they think you're the enemy." The entire world trembled. From the depths of ancient vaults, from war factories buried beneath mountains, they woke. Soldiers, machines, weapons. 500,000 years had gone, but time had not degraded them. Humanity had not just locked itself away, it had prepared. For the moment, it would rise again. And now, that moment had come. Ureth staggered as a deep, metallic groan rippled through the control room. The holographic map revealed movement. Thousands of red markers flickering to life. Vault doors split open. Mechanized walkers ascended from the ruins. Gigantic battleships, each one larger than the Dominion's capital fleet, lifted from their concealed docks, dusting off dust like slumbering giants. Kavor's voice trembled. "This isn't just a military base. It's a tomb waking up." The individual didn't react. He simply observed as his people stirred, as ancient war rituals engaged. His golden gaze monitored each activation report, each signal of life. "They were waiting for this moment," he added gently, "waiting for the time to return." Ureth swallowed. His armada was still in orbit. The Dominion ships had no idea what was going below. If humanity perceived them as invaders, if they attacked, this wouldn't be a war. It would be extermination. "Call them off," Ureth snapped. The human gazed at him. "Excuse me?" "Your fleet," Ureth clarified. "Your people." His voice was angry, but underneath it there was something else. Fear. "They don't know we're not a threat." The person exhaled, running a hand over his dark hair. He appeared exhausted, ancient, as if he had carried the weight of 500,000 years of history alone. "They won't fire first," he remarked at last. Ureth wasn't convinced. "And if they see us as enemies?" The human's golden eyes twitched. Then he continued softly. "You'll have about 30 seconds before your fleet is erased from existence." Kavor let out a choked groan. Ureth clenched his hands. "Then tell them we're not enemies." The human regarded him for a long moment. Then, with a hesitant nod, he turned back to the console. His fingers danced across the keys, typing commands quicker than Ureth could track. The system replied promptly. A fresh signal pulsed from the ancient network, rising up towards the sky. A message. Admiral Vax strode on the bridge of his cruiser, his spines bristling. "Where is the landing team?" "No response, Admiral," an officer replied uneasily. "There's interference." Vax's gaze narrowed. Something was wrong. Then alarms blazed across the command deck. "Admiral!" a technician gasped. "New contacts? Thousands!" A large blip emerged on their scanners. Ships? Big ships. Vax's blood became cold. They were emerging from the planet like specters. Warships unlike any in recorded history. Their intentions were old, yet strangely beyond anything the Dominion had ever faced. And worst of all, they were powering guns. "Sir," another cop muttered, They're human." Silence fell over the bridge. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity had been nothing more than a myth, a lost species, a forgotten nightmare. The idea that they may return had seemed ridiculous, yet here they were, and they were waking up. Then a transmission flashed across the Dominion channels. One single statement, one single warning. "Stand down." Vax's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. He glanced at the arriving battleships, at the huge vessels that could wipe his entire fleet in minutes. He had no choice. "Cease all hostile actions," he instructed. "Do not fire." The Dominion fleet obeyed, but it didn't matter, because humanity was already here. Ureth let out a slow sigh as the transmission sent. The human sat back slightly, watching the data scroll. "They're hesitating," he mumbled. "Good," Kavor remarked, voice quivering. Then another deep rumble shook the city, not from the Dominion, not from the warships above, from deeper underground. The human's golden eyes narrowed. "No." Ureth frowned. "What?" The human's face clouded. "Not all of them should be waking up." Another tremor, then another. The panels flickered. More red alerts filled the displays, each one displaying symbols in the ancient human language. Kavor paled as he translated them. Containment breach. Ureth's blood grew cold. Containment of what? The human's jaw tightened. "The war wasn't just against ourselves," he replied gently. "There were other things." Another tremor, this one stronger. Dust dropped from the ceiling. The security doors moaned as if something deep beneath them was moving. The human's face stiffened. "We didn't just fight an enemy," he remarked. His fingers hesitated over the console, his golden eyes glowing. "We locked something away." A final, deep, horrific snarl rumbled from the bowels of the earth. Something was waking up, something that should have stayed buried. The human turned to Ureth. "You need to call your fleet back. Now." The rumbling got louder. Not the sound of warships taking flight, not the hum of ancient technology reactivating. This was something deeper, something wrong. Ureth felt it in his bones, a low, unnatural vibration, like the entire world itself was terrified. The person moved rapidly, hands a blur as he punched commands onto the control panel. Screens flashed red, alarms blared, subterranean vaults had been breached, something had fled. Ureth fought down his panic. "What did you lock away? Down there?" The human's jaw clenched. "A mistake." The Dominion commander narrowed his gaze. "What kind of mistake?" The person paused. Then he turned to Ureth, and for the first time, he seemed uncertain. "It wasn't just humanity that disappeared," he remarked. "Something else was wiped out." Kavor's tendrils trembled. "Another species?" The human's golden eyes heated. "Something worse." Another deep tremor. This time, the entire city lurched as if some huge force was shifting beneath the surface. The walls groaned, dust showered from the ceiling. Then a roar, not mechanical, not fake, something living. The lights flickered, the control. Panels glitched, the symbols transformed into jagged, mangled letters, as if the entire system itself was screaming. Kavor gasped. It's overriding the security systems, Urith whirled toward the human. What the hell is waking? Up! The guy inhaled sharply, his fingers flexing, curling into fists. A long time ago, he added quietly, we weren't alone. The red alerts intensified. The temperature decreased. The air felt heavier. We ruled the galaxy, the person continued. But we weren't the first ones to try. Korunk's voice shook. What do you mean? The human's eyes hardened. We exterminated them, he claimed. Completely. Urith's breath caught. A species erased. Not conquered, not subjugated. Erased. And now, after 500,000 years, they were coming back. Admiral Villak remained motionless when the second signal arrived from the planet. Not from the human, nor from the battleships, but from something else. Sir, one cop muttered, there's something down there. Villak turned to the holographic display. What had once been a dead world was now alive with warnings. And beneath the surface, deep beneath the layers of buried cities and ancient war equipment, something was moving. The Dominion had taken planets before. They had seen rebellions, armies, biological horrors. But nothing like this. The energy fingerprints were wrong. Ancient than the humans, older than everything. A deep pulse surged across the scanners, and for the first time in Dominion history, the sensors shouted, in dread. Urith hardly had time to respond before the floor ripped open. A deep, jagged fissure tore through the ground, splitting the control room in two. Machinery toppled. Kavor almost caught himself before plunging into the rising abyss. The individual didn't move. He merely peered into the blackness. Urith pulled Kavor back, his claws piercing into the scientist's arm. We need to get out of here. But the human smiled. It wasn't amusement. It wasn't confidence. It was relief. The war never ended, he whispered. Kavor trembled. What? The human's golden eyes glittered. You asked what happened to us, he said. Why we vanished. The ground rocked. Fissures spread across the city. In the distance, human vessels began changing into fighting. Formations. Urith recognized with rising terror that this moment was what they had been waiting for. The human turned to him. We didn't leave, he said. We locked ourselves away. Urith's blood grew cold. The human's smile faded. His voice sank to a whisper. Because we knew they would come back. Then, from the darkness, it emerged. A shape. Huge. Not organic. Not mechanical. Something else. Something wrong. It didn't crawl. It didn't walk. It simply existed, as if reality itself had forgotten how to reject it. Urith's mind screamed. He felt his body rejecting the thing's presence, like his own cells realized this creature was not intended to be. Kavor slumped, grasping his head. The human, however, only cracked his neck. For the first time since waking, he seemed satisfied. Finally, he groped for something on his wrist. A little device. A trigger. Urith barely had time to grasp what was happening before the human pressed it. A deep, reverberating boom swept through the planet. The sky darkened. Then, from the horizon, the true war fleet rose. Not just the ships in space. Not just the weaponry concealed beneath the ground. This was something older. Something deadlier, something built for extinction. They had been waiting for 500,000 years. They had been waiting. And now, when the first of the ancient adversary emerged from its captivity, humanity's finest weapons looked toward the heavens once more. The last human grinned. Now, he whispered, we finish this. Hey everyone! If you enjoy these epic HFY stories, don't forget to subscribe. Press the like button and drop a comment below to let us know your favorite portion or what stories you'd love to hear next. Your support keeps the channel growing and the tales coming. Thanks for being part of our channel.